I have to tell the world how the Lord got my car for me. It's a little Dodge Spirit. My son was getting ready to take me to Jerusalem on a 3-week trip and to Egypt. And I saw a little car out there on the parking lot out in Normandy, and I had to have that Dodge Spirit now. So I came up with all the money that I needed but $1,500. So I went home and told my son, Jim, I saw this car, and I'm $1,500 short of getting the car. Jim told me, well, he would buy the car, but I couldn't have the trip and the car. So I went back to tell Mr. Slick that my predicament. And in the meantime, a young gentleman came into the shop and sat next to where I was sitting talking to Mr. Slick. And when I finished, he asked me if that was my car out on the parking lot and was it for sale, and I said yes. And he handed $15 $100 bills in my hand. So I got the trip and the car. Isn't God good? Now I'm going to talk about a young lady, Donna. She had a brother-in-law who liked to ride motorcycles. This is my goddaughter who lives in Hawaii right now. Donna had a brother-in-law who was a motorcyclist, and he was flying down the highway going over 100 miles an hour and ran under a pickup truck going 100 miles an hour and broke his back and his neck. Well, the family they were told that this young man, I don't even know the man's name to this day, that he wouldn't live through the night, and asked me to come pray for him at St. Joe Hospital in St. Charles. So Steve got out of bed and drove me over there at 3 o'clock in the morning. And the nuns weren't going to let me in the hospital. So now I've had to climb up fire escapes before. And I thought, well, I guess that's what I'm going to have to do in order to see this young man. So finally they decided they'd better let me in. So Steve and I went up to the 5th floor. You could smell death when you went into his room. He was weighed down with a 50-pound bag of sand with a spike through his head to hold him stable. Had he moved a fraction of an inch, he would have been paralyzed or died, either one. So we had our prayer for him. The family were asleep in the hallway where they'd been for several nights over this situation. They didn't expect to see him the next morning. But when they woke up, he had taken the spike out of his head and was sitting up eating breakfast. Now, how do you like that testimony? That's the power of prayer. You know, power. Now, we're used to manpower and brain power, and we should be out there, instead of playing church and playing house, playing women, just playing marriage and just playing all over the place. We should get down to business and get healing going in the world again, because it's there. God said, greater things than these will you do than he did, because he had to leave and go unto his Father. He left that here for us to do. But I don't see very much of it going on, and that's why I'm telling these stories. And they're going to be told if God lets me live long enough. And we wonder if we have the faith, why do we have to ask God to do things? Because God told us to. He said, ask and you shall receive. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door will be open unto you. But why are we so afraid to trust the Lord and Savior of this world who made and created it? And people will look right at you and say, yes, I believe. But when they don't, they really don't believe. And I wonder what God thinks about all that, you know? Well, when he came into my life, I was 25 years old. Told me to go lay hands on the sick and they would recover. But I didn't know he was going to send me into a Black Baptist church now. That's where I've been half my life. We raised a little black boy from the time he was 6 years old. And my kid used to get beat up all the time because of little Jerry. His white friends would beat up on him, call the house and threaten to burn our house down. And we're all still here, and half of them are gone. So, love hides a multitude of sin, and love, it heals anything. Love heals. Love will turn darkness into light, sickness into health. And sometimes it really makes you wealthy too. God is a whole bundle of wealth, all in itself. And if we have the right heart and the right spirit that we should have as Christians, there's no limit to what God will do